Hello, I'm going to show you the basics of using Project Libre, which used to be called OpenProj, but now been reincarnated with this new name. I made an introductory video about OpenProj several years ago that was pretty popular, but now with the renaming of the program and some interface changes and some upgrades, it's time to do a new intro to the program. When you first open after installing the program, when you first open it, you see this Welcome to Project Libre screen, and you decide if you're opening a former project or creating a new one. So I'm just going to create a new one. And you get this new project screen, which also comes up if you hit new over here on the menu. So for my sample project, I'm going to paint my living room in my house. So I'll call it Paint Living Room. Okay. Start date I'll put as today, it defaults to today's date. In this case it's forward scheduled, which means that it assumes I'm starting from this date going forward. If I uncheck this, the assumption is I want to finish on a certain date and move backwards, but I'm going to do forward scheduled in this case. Okay, I'll say OK, and this is the basic screen that comes up. When you're starting with a project management software like this, and this is very much the way Microsoft Project works the same way. What I'd like to do is just put in the major task right over here. So I'm going to start, and I'm just going to go in roughly in the order I expect to do these things. So I have to select a color. If I hit return, it goes to the next line. So I have to prep walls. First coat of paint. Second coat paint. Trim, paint the trim. Paint, trim. Okay, so now I've got my major steps there, and I can start thinking about the duration and time intervals and what's known as dependencies. So this point I have my major steps, but actually I forgot a couple steps. One, I'm going to add that I have to go buy the paint. So I select the row where I want this item to be before, and I switch to the task menu up here, and I say press the insert button. I got a new role here, so I say buy paint. The other thing I forgot to put in is I have to paint the ceiling, decided. So going to and typically when you paint a room, interior room, you really do the ceiling first, because when you paint the walls, you don't want the ceiling paint to potentially drip down onto the walls as you're painting them. So actually that would be first. So I'm going to put this in here, insert, and I put paint ceiling. Now, essentially, your list up here can be like an outline. And when to paint the ceiling, actually, since I'm going to have to complete that before I do the first coat of the walls, I'm actually going to make a sub item for that, and I'm going to insert 1, 2 rows, and I'm going to put first coat, second coat. And then select both of those, shift click both of those, or right click, and I say indent. Now notice what happened. It indented these, and now I made these first coat and second coat indented under paint ceiling, which means that those items now belong to the heading of paint ceiling. On the right here it shows this black spreader, which eventually will spread out to show the duration of the collective duration of the items under paint ceiling. So now I'm going to start putting in some of the time intervals, how long I think these things are going to take. So this is where it can get a little confusing, this project management software, because it defaults, and I'll open this up a little bit. It defaults to 1 day, and in this case it assumes a work day is 8 hours. As you can see, it starts 3:25, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now obviously the problem with this is, since I'm one person working on this, that I actually cannot do all these things all in one day. So I have to change the days that these are worked on. Even if I had 4 or 5 people working on it, certain things have to be done before other things. So even in that situation, not all these things can happen on the same day and for the same duration. So one way to create the schedule is to manually change the start dates on the start date column. So what I'll do here, I'll just indicate that I'm going to, well actually I'm going to go select them by the paint the same day. The prep walls I'm going to do the next day. So I'll just change that to the 26th. And notice in the Gantt chart area that the little graphic representing that task is moved to the right under one day over. Let me blow that area up so we can see that a little better and see what's going on. So I got a task, I'm going to zoom in, there we go. And then I'll do here, so this would be the, so in this case you can double click and see the thing. Now because this row controls 2 sub items, I can't fix the duration, but if I go to first code here, actually I can change the date right here. I'll change that to 26th. Move that one out, and then I'll actually second day for the ceiling, I'll make that the 7th, and that moves out and so forth. So I can, as you can see, the times are manually moving out. The other way is to actually drag these the boxes, graphic boxes representing the task around. So now for, let's say, first code walls, let's drag this right out to here. Second code walls, I can drag it right out to there and move this over, and I can drag this one out here. So I can very quickly sort of, and actually it's skipped over the weekend because it's not part of the designated work week. So you see what happens there, and we've manually moved these around to create the times. And let's say that for some reason I cannot start the first code on the 28th. I can just move that to 29th, and then I have to move this over, and everything has to trickle down. So it's like that and so forth. So you see that it's easy to manually drag around these tasks, and you'll notice that in the start and finish time, the finish times, dates and dates change as I move them around the chart. But there's another way of doing this. Okay, so one way of doing this is to create dependencies. In other words, one task cannot happen before the other task. And the way that to do that, you can do it over here on the Gantt chart portion of the chart. So I'm actually going to enlarge that, zoom it in, move it into the center here, zoom in a little more, get to the center. Okay, there you go. And you hear all the items happening on Monday, March 25th. So if I put my cursor over an item here, and obviously I can't buy the paint until I select a color, I'm going to drag this down, and you see when I drag, this little line comes out with a anchor link on the end. I drag it to the next, to the buy paint item, and boom, look what happened. It automatically put buy paint onto the next day and created a dependency, meaning that I can't obviously buy the paint until I select the color. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this over here so I can see more of my Gantt chart area. So obviously I can't, now I could prep the walls before I buy the paint, but I really can't paint until I buy the paint. And since I have to prep the walls before I do any painting, I'm going to create a dependency of buy paint to prep walls. So I drag this over and boom. Now it's automatically moved over by a day. Select color, buy paint, prep walls. But you know, I really could select the color and buy the paint on the same day. So since I can select the color pretty quickly, it's not going to take a whole day. I'm going to actually show you how to change that, the duration of that. So I'm going to expand my table window over here, And I'm going to put select color. I think that's going to, since it's an 8-hour day, I'll put in that's going to take me. I double click and it brings up a detail for that item. And I'm going to put in actually 2 hours, 2 HR, and watch what happens. It automatically converted it to a quarter of a day. Also notice on my Gantt chart side that it compressed the amount of time that selecting the paint would take, and actually started the step of buying the paint on the same day. But it's also not going to take me a whole day to go buy the paint. So if I go over here, I double click that, and I think it's going to take me about, I can actually also put a percentage of a day. If I put 0.5 days, hit close, and notice now that it put those two things on the same day. But I'm really probably not going to prep the walls on the same day I select the color and buy the paint. So if I grab, and you can go back and forth until these on these things. You know, you can set a time start dates over here, or you can drag things on the right to open it up. So I'm going to drag the item prep walls to what becomes 8 a.m. on Tuesday, March 26th. So now I have spending a quarter of a day selecting a color, half a day going to the store and buying the paint, selecting and coming back, and then prepping the walls on the next day. At this point, so I'm going to make this a little smaller so I can see what's happening over here. Now I'm going to create the dependency. I really can't paint the until prep is done, so I'm going to drag my dependency line to paint ceiling and move that over. Now I'm going to drag this again, the first coat to the second coat of the ceiling. Okay, and this actually is about right because you really need it to dry in between. So for painting a room, it actually works out pretty well because it would be about a day for each step. I mean, especially if it's in the summer and it's humid. But in any case, okay. So now I've got these. I'm going to zoom out so I can see my other items there. Okay, so now I can do, after I've done the second coat in the ceiling, drag my dependency for the first coat of the walls, second coat of the walls. So you can see it skipped over the weekend because my work week doesn't include the weekend. So finally, let me create the dependency from the second coat to painting the trim. And there it goes, and now that's out there, finishing up on April 2nd. Let's say I have to take a day off from my painting. And I have to take the Friday the 29th off. If I click on that, double click it over here, there's a couple things. I could drag this over like this, and it moved everything from that point on, leaving the 29th free. Or I could click on here. Let's say I needed to skip a day here and start this later. Double click that, and I can indicate here that clicking the little calendar tool that I want to do that on the 27th, close it, and it pushes everything out. So this is on the 27th now, skipping a day between the 25th. So that's basically the that's Project Libre in a nutshell, doing the very basics with it. It can get a lot more complicated, but that's just an introduction. What I'll do is I'll zoom out here, and then I can see all my steps in the Gantt chart view. Here are my steps in the table view with my dependencies and so forth. So thanks for watching.